After her daughter was born, Teresa experienced postpartum depression. One day, her husband was out and she decided to go somewhere with the baby.
And I had backed up the car before the garage door was fully up. And then the garage door was bent and it was wrecked and there was nothing I could do. And, I was really worried when he came home that, I would show him this thing and I thought he'd be mad. And he said to me, he was like, I was just relieved that it was something I could fix, because up until that point, so much was going on with me that he couldn't really fix.
Welcome to In This Family, presented by Nexus Family Healing. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray, President and CEO. I have two stories to share in this episode, but only one guest, Teresa Wong. She lives in Calgary with her husband and their 3 kids. Teresa is a graphic memoirist, writes and illustrates stories from her life. Dear Scarlet was about her experience with postpartum depression after the birth of her oldest child. Then came All Our Ordinary Stories, about her parents fleeing China and finding their way to Calgary, where they raised Teresa and her brother. Her books have won numerous awards. She teaches memoir and comics at Gotham Writers, and her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The Believer, and McSweeney's. And I think when you listen to my talk with Teresa, you'll find more overlap in the stories than you might have expected. You'll hear about postpartum depression, which happens to about 1 in 7 women. Teresa didn't expect it, had a hard time getting support for it, but ultimately found the help she needed. And we'll hear about Teresa's parents, with whom she shared a home, a little bit of common language, but not much at all in the way of nurturing or support. Her high school and college graduations, they didn't go. Book launch parties, they weren't there either. It's been a long road of understanding and not approval, but acceptance. Teresa said Scarlet's birth was rough, more than 20 hours of labor. But then there were new challenges.
We went home with this little baby, kind of not knowing anything about how to take care of a baby, but I was also completely depleted and exhausted, and I had kind of blacked out actually after having the baby, and kind of woke up to my husband having learned how to put a diaper on and feed with a bottle. I already felt like I was way behind somehow.
Yeah.
I had missed the first few hours and kind of all that instruction, and so we went home and I was just so tired, and I could barely just sit and hold the baby, like sitting up felt like way too much effort. I don't think anyone, there just wasn't a lot of communication either. And so we didn't really know what to expect and then, got home and started taking care of Scarlet, but I just felt off the entire time and exhausted. I do wish that someone had talked. We did take a prenatal class, and I don't recall actually, we talked a bit about, the labor and delivery room and, things like that. But we never really talked about mental health, I don't think. Or if we did, it was in such a quick and passing way that it didn't even register, And so even if someone had, talked more in depth about how this could happen, how it's quite common, I think, and the differences between maybe the baby blues versus full-on postpartum depression, I think that would have helped.
Because that's really what you're referring to, that you ended up experiencing, is full-on postpartum depression, correct?
I think so. Yeah. I went to the doctor here in Calgary or in Canada. We have a 1-week kind of postpartum checkup where you bring the baby to the doctor and the doctor kind of looks at you both see how you're doing within that first week. And I told my doctor about how I was just, crying all the time and tired and didn't really, feel right. And she said, "Oh, it's just the baby blues. Like, you just need to go outside and take a walk every day and you'll be fine." At my 6-week checkup with a different doctor after I had had Scarlet, again, I noted all of the things I was going through mentally, and that doctor said, "I think you have postpartum depression. We should get you some treatment." And she gave me a few options and got me into counseling pretty quickly after that. And at the same time, my husband said, "Well, I've heard of these people called postpartum doulas who can, help with taking care of a baby, after you've given birth." And so he just looked them up, Googled postpartum doula in Calgary, and we found one. Her name was AJ, and she made such a huge difference that with my second and my third, we had her back from the delivery room onward, and that
great.
that was super helpful. And I was already comfortable with her, but she also was just so expert, in the ways of taking care of a baby and taking care of a mom. And she always explained to me that, her job was to work herself out of a job, like, so that she just comes alongside for, a little while and kind of gets you on your feet again. And so, yeah, in both my second and third babies, having a postpartum doula really helped. And then with my second, I also did have postpartum depression, but a little bit later on, when she was, I think, 6 or 7 months old. And so by my third, I kind of knew that this was a possibility again. And so I actually started perinatal counseling during my pregnancy with my third child, and then that just continued postpartum, and that was really helpful. And actually with my third child, I didn't have any postpartum depression symptoms, and it was kind of the first time where I really thought, like, oh, this is how other people feel when they have babies.
Yeah.
like, oh, this is different. Like, and I was really glad to have had that experience too, because I just hadn't felt that before. Like, I just remember nursing him and looking down at him and just like being flooded with like emotions of joy, and it just was such a foreign thing to me at that point, and this is my third child.
Can you kind of explain? I know you can only talk about your experience. You can't talk about everybody's experience with postpartum, but can you just sort of describe what you learned for yourself, what that meant? What did it look like? What did it feel like?
I mean, just you feel like you've been in like a car wreck, I think, is not that I've been in a car wreck, but like how much it affects your entire body, and even the most basic things like using the washroom and stuff like that is it feels like you're kind of re-traumatized every time you go, because everything hurts and everything is sensitive, and then just the just getting up and walking around is a bit scary, immediately postpartum, but even for days or weeks afterwards. And that's not, I didn't even have a C-section, which is which is a major surgery that many women go through. And that, the symptoms of that can or the recovery from that can last like weeks on end, like 6 weeks or more. Yeah, it's such a physical thing to give birth to a baby. However, whether it's a vaginal delivery or a C-section, and you really are just completely beat up by it. And that's in a normal case, besides
Right.
any sort of medical issue.
And then what about emotionally and psychologically from a postpartum depression standpoint? What did that feel like, look like?
For me, it was I was very weepy and down on myself, but then I also kept it all inside because I felt very isolated from everyone else, and a lot of it came from how cheerful and joyful everyone else was. And so I felt like I had to hide my feelings of actual regret, or like the fact that I'm not sure this was a good thing that happened in my life yet, and I'd have friends come over and they'd say, oh, didn't you just fall in love with her the minute you saw her? And things like that. And I felt like I don't even know this baby, like, and so it made me feel like kind of a monster inside, that I didn't have those kind of common, or what we think of as typical motherly feelings. But and that kind of just compounds.
You were talking about how it shifted a little bit with each baby. So can you talk about how you prepared yourself for the second one, and then we'll move into what
Sure,
changed
yeah.
for that third one?
So for the second one, yeah, we had AJ come back as my postpartum doula right from the start, and that really helped. And then my husband, we were very lucky. He was working contract work at the time, and so he just didn't take a contract for the first, basically 6 months of my second life. And we had kind of prepared for that. And so, it again, I had postpartum depression after he went back to work, and after, I was home alone again, but this time taking care of 2 kids under 2. And so it was, a surprise a little bit, because we had kind of warded it off for a while, but also not a surprise, because again, a lot of it was just again a transition, and me trying to figure out how to do things while being totally exhausted. And also kind of with kind of that negative self-talk, like how to live with that. And so I did go back to counseling at that point, and this time around I didn't take Zoloft. We decided to just try doing cognitive behavioral therapy, and I felt like that was really helpful for me, because of my tendency towards negative self-talk and kind of jumping to these grand conclusions of how terrible a person I am, when that isn't necessarily the case, right?
Right.
And you can kind of stop that, mental leap, and kind of pause for a minute and say, well, wait a minute, yeah, sure, I had a bad day, and maybe the toddler is crying and the baby is throwing up or whatever, but that has nothing to do with how good or bad of a person I am. They're just, babies do that and toddlers do that. And so I think doing the CBT really changed a lot of the ways that I saw myself, the ways that I talked to myself in my mind, and just it just kept me from making these automatic assumptions when things weren't going well.
What were some of those messages that you were sending yourself that were helpful, like after you were doing the CBT, the cognitive behavior therapy so what were the new messages that you
I
were
think
sending yourself to help?
I think sometimes I was getting into a lot of like all or nothing thinking, like I made this one choice and now everything's ruined forever kind of thing. And so just taking a step back and going, okay, like maybe that wasn't the best choice, but here's how you can address it right now. And you're just a person, like this is your first time doing all of this, like, and so you don't need to be so hard on yourself. It's not going to ruin everything forever, like stuff like that, where or just overgeneralizing, like, if I threw a diaper in the wash by accident, like, which I did.
Oh.
like I'm not dumb, I'm not like I'm just tired, like I wasn't paying attention, and like that kind of stuff, like whereas originally I would have just berated myself and like just and it's like, no, it's not as big of a deal as you think it is. First of all, like you can rewash the clothes, like and that kind of stuff happens. And also you're not you're not a mess of a person if you do that. Like,
What were some of the most important things that your husband did to help you during this time, or other people in your life, even though you didn't have a name for it? What was still really critical in helping you?
My husband, as we talked about earlier, did everything he could in terms of like, especially with my second, setting me up like with a lot of help and being very hands-on with taking care of the babies, and and then I think my mother brought food over a lot, and was like very helpful in that way. I think sometimes it was like as small as, if a friend came over, just at least, when it was just Scarlet, like just offering to hold the baby for a while, like parents talk a lot about being like all touched out, or mothers do, and like and it's just nice, a relief to like have someone just come in and take the baby or do a load of laundry for you, or clean up a little bit without making a fuss about it, or just I think people recognizing just how many things you have to do and take care of in a day, and if they just took like one of those things off your plate, that's really helpful. And then other friends who just like invited me out, and were like cognizant of the fact that going out with a person with a baby is going to be, really not that fun. And you're going to have to, make a lot of pauses and, and not really have a full, like, cohesive conversation or anything, but still be willing to, like, spend time together and kind of help you feel more like a normal person, and have an adult conversation again. Is also very helpful.
Sometimes people who've gone through postpartum have also experienced just depression in their life, outside of that. Was that an issue for you at all, or has it been?
Yes, I think I went through a period of being clinically depressed in my first year of university, and I don't think I went on I don't think it was actually treated. So I went to the university clinic. I was, all of this was very new to me, and the doctor had said that, and then kind of just left the clinic and went on with my life. But it was definitely a bout of depression. I recognize that now in hindsight.
And what were you experiencing that you went into the clinic for? What was
just
going on?
Again, like kind of just a real, somehow a combination of real sadness and numbness, and kind of like just all the joy being sucked out of life, and overwhelmed, and I don't know how I got through it now that I think back on it, but somehow I kind of just muddled my way through. And I think part of that depression was just like also the big transition between like high school and university, and kind of taking on, a lot more responsibility, and also at that point in time, I had terrible finances, and so it was just a lot of worry too.
Yeah.
I think in figuring out how to like support myself, and so I know I had been through one bout of kind of like a long, stretched out, months long depression before my postpartum depression.
Well, shifting from this to just maybe kind of going back in your life a little bit, let's go more into your family. How did you get to Calgary?
So I was born and raised in Calgary, but my parents are immigrants from China, and they, as young people, came of age during the Cultural Revolution in China, so in the late 60s and early 70s. And they were both sent as young adults to communes to work on the farm, even though they were city kids, to kind of learn from the peasants, because that was Mao Zedong's kind of approach, was like he wanted to smash the educated and elite, and kind of have everyone be a peasant or a worker or part of the proletariat. So they did not enjoy those lives that they had on a commune. It was hard work. So they both decided to escape separately. They didn't know each other then. And what they had to do was escape from the commune, travel, a great distance to the coast, and then hike through coastal mountains until they got to a bay that was close enough to Hong Kong where they could try to swim to Hong Kong. And yeah, so that's what they did.
It's an incredible story of what they went through. I can't even imagine.
I know, it's
going
like
through that.
I often think about my mom just like, and my dad, like just basically leaving everything behind, stepping into the water and not knowing, like having no guarantee of what was going to happen next, and just going for it anyways. And it really tells you how bad their lives were before that, but also how, I guess, courageous and brave they were to do something like that.
Yeah, and just the strength that they must have had.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that that's affected their parenting?
So we don't have the best relationship. They're very closed off people. And I think that the trauma of that, and, being immigrants, and kind of having to just work very hard all their lives, has made them, in a way, not the best parents, because they're just in themselves, and they don't really acknowledge or have no interest in their kids' mental health, possibly because they don't understand that it could actually be an issue. I think about it as like, Maslow's hierarchy of human needs or whatever. Like, for them, just having safety and physical, like having their physical needs met was all they really wanted, growing up and even into adulthood. And so I think they thought that was it. Like, and so if they provided, me and my brother with the physical things and safety and security, that we would be fine. But it turns out, there's a bunch of layers actually above that, where they didn't concern themselves with any of that, And so there was a bit of a lack there, I guess.
And what do you attribute that to?
I'm not sure. Part of it, I think, is just their personalities or maybe their personal trauma, or the way they grew up. And then I think part of it is cultural. I've heard a lot of Asian American, second generation kids talk about this too. I think, it could be part of the culture where, like, maybe people from those cultures aren't used to talking about mental health issues or the need for, I guess, emotional nurturing or self-actualization, that kind of thing.
And how has that impacted your parenting of your kids now?
I think I've probably swung around the other way, maybe a little too hard in a way. I tell my kids I love them a lot, and that's something I've never really heard from my parents, and to the point where they're like, I know, like, you said that already, I don't care. I over-explain everything to them, but honestly, I'd rather err on that side than the other way. So,
now, am I to understand correctly that there was also a language gap with
there
you and
is
your parents?
Yeah, a big barrier there, because my parents speak Cantonese, and very little English, and I speak the Cantonese of a 5-year-old, basically, which is basically when I stopped speaking Chinese all the time because I went to school and I learned English, and English became my dominant language. And again, my Cantonese is stunted and kind of limited to speaking about physical things like eating and, food. And so it's not really conducive to having conversations about mental health or emotions, even. Like, I there are many emotions that I can't name in Cantonese. And, so it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but for me, between me and my parents, it kind of doesn't, because you can't name those things.
Yeah, and that certainly would put up a barrier between the relationship building between, I would imagine,
Mm-hmm.
you and I believe your brother, right? You have a sibling?
Yes,
Or your brother?
my younger brother.
And, how that would affect your relationship with your parents. And I'm trying to imagine that this must be an experience of a lot of immigrants.
I think so. I've been told that, since my second book came out, like, a lot of people reach out and say, like, this was exactly the way it was with my parents. And, like, I know they love me because they fed me, but but they've never said it, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And then what role did your father play and in your family, if anything?
He definitely my mom was the primary caregiver. My dad was there, and he was a provider, and kind of tried at times to spend time with us, I guess, but not really, and I don't know if that's also cultural or just, or it was the 80s, and he just wasn't expected to. And so he just basically worked on his own, in the garage a lot, and wasn't really interested in kind of familial closeness. For example, he didn't go to my high school graduation or my university graduation. And it wasn't because he just didn't care enough to go, he didn't see a point. He wouldn't understand the speeches or anything, and it would be long and boring. And
And were you aware of that at the time? That was
I
the reason
mean,
he wasn't going?
yeah, I knew that was the reason he wasn't going. I knew it wasn't that he didn't care about me, but also, I guess, he didn't care enough about me to do that. And that's, I don't think that is cultural. I think that's just him. And then sometimes it's my mom too. Neither of them went to my book launches, although I asked them, but I was kind of prepared for them not to really care. And I think, it goes back to when I said earlier that they are very much inside themselves, and I do attribute that to the trauma and the way they grew up. They can't see beyond that, to see that I might need that kind of support, in my life. And so, when I, have two very exciting things happen to me, the two books that I've published, they don't see that they need to really be a part of that, because they just see that they wouldn't have fun at that kind of event. They wouldn't really understand, the language, and so they're not going to go.
Right. I want to really know, based on what you're describing, how your parents were and just how they kind of showed up emotionally, because it sounds like they just really weren't present emotionally.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
For you and I assume your brother, not just you.
Yeah.
How have you resolved that that's just how your parents are?
I think it is just that, a radical acceptance. I think doing the book and kind of delving into their histories gave me better perspective on why they might be that way. That it's not 100% just that they don't care about me, that kind of thing, or it has actually very little to do with me. And that this is who they are. This is, partly a result of generations of trauma, that have happened. They both grew up without fathers in their homes. They have very, I think, different expectations of what family looks like, family life, or or what kids need. And so, for a long time, it was upsetting to me. But I think I've come around, having done this book and kind of really seen how stacked the odds were against them. That I'm okay. This is just the way they are. This is just the way our relationship is. I can't change that, but I can not let it be as upsetting to me, I guess. And that I have, what I do have control over is not passing that forward, or down towards my children. And so in that way, like I feel free of it now, and a large part of it is having written and drawn my book. Like, I think in my book, because I'm a comics artist and it focuses so much on my parents' stories, I had to draw them over and over again. So like there are hundreds of images of my parents, like faces that I've drawn in the book, and you can't spend all that time like looking at photo references of them and drawing their faces over and over again, especially when they were young people, like I drew both my parents escape, and I was looking at pictures of them in their 20s, and you can't do that without feeling a sense of compassion and and just like a tenderness towards them, because when you look at the pictures, it's like they were just kids, really, like they, and I feel like that tenderness has kind of stayed with me even though I'm done with the book, like that you can't, there's no point in holding on to kind of the I guess feeling of injustice or or that they've done something wrong to me, because it's at the end of it all, like, it doesn't really matter for me. I can find ways to move forward that are healthier.
That's a great outlook. And the book you're referring to is the one that's All Our Ordinary Stories, your latest one, correct?
Yes, yeah, correct.
So it sounds like going through writing that book and drawing for that book, that it really helped you resolve some of those feelings and or just coming to understand your parents better, it sounds
I think
like.
so, yeah. I think it gave me a lot more understanding, and there's a writer, Steve Almond, who says that writing memoir is a forgiveness racket, like and that you don't write something out of like vengeance and it's like, oh, I'll get them, that doesn't make for a good book. If you want to write a good book, you've got to be in a position of like at least a stance, of forgiveness, and be open to that. And I really felt that happening like throughout the process of writing this book.
So tie in your decision to be a cartoonist and narrating the book through cartoons and comic style, graphic novels,
right.
However people refer to this.
Yeah. I started this journey, to becoming a cartoonist when I started my first book, Dear Scarlet, about postpartum depression, and I hadn't planned on drawing it. I'm a writer, and I thought that I would write a script and then collaborate with an illustrator, who was a friend that I worked with. And he was the one who told me, after I showed him kind of what I was thinking, like I showed him the script and I had sketched out some images like that I thought would be kind of inspirational for him. And he said, no, you have to do this. Like, this is such a personal and vulnerable story that everything has to come from your own hand. And I was really nervous because I thought, like, I'm not an artist. I'm not trained. And I couldn't draw much better than what I had shown him. But he really was insistent. He said that the story's going to hit harder if everything's in your hand. And so I did Dear Scarlet, and it was well received, even though some of the drawings are really crappy. And then I came to the desire to write this about my parents, and I thought, well, now that I've done one book this way, I'd like to try it this way as well for my parents' story. And I had gotten better at drawing over the years, but it's still not, the best. Like, I still am very much a self-taught kind of accidental cartoonist. But I really enjoyed the process, like, just trying to visualize their stories, like, in a realistic way, and also kind of delving back into my own, childhood stories and being able to kind of show people what I'm seeing in my mind, in my mind's eye, has been really a fun process. And drawing has kind of changed my outlook in a way. It's a practice that is different from writing, I feel like. And it feels a lot more meditative and soothing than writing can be for me. And I feel like that is also part of my healing, I guess. that drawing itself is a therapeutic act.
Yeah, for sure. That can really tap into a whole different part of the brain. Releasing those emotions, experiencing them. And I can't help but draw a parallel between what you described as, very little language connection between you and your parents because of the language difference, and the emotional, just them kind of being all into themselves emotionally. And then, thinking of a graphic narrative, how much emotion you can see in the pictures. And there's not a lot of words, right? It's not a prose book.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of feeling and a lot of affect and without the words. And I think to myself, wow, what a parallel between
interesting
that with what you were experiencing growing up. There probably was a lot of feeling going on, but you wouldn't have necessarily
a lot of silence.
A lot of silence.
Yeah, I've never made that connection before. That's really interesting. But yeah, I think you're right. They must be connected.
Yeah, because, if your parents, I assume then they haven't read the books if they didn't go to your book openings, or have they read them?
I'm not 100% sure about my first book. It did come out in Chinese, like a Chinese publisher picked it up and published it in Chinese. And so I gave them a copy, and then no one mentioned it ever again. And I didn't ask, and they didn't offer, and then, but I do know. So I was over there helping them translate some condo board documents, and they had invited a friend who lived a couple floors down, who was also Chinese, and they're like, she would like to also know what these documents are about, and so I went over there, and this friend said, I enjoyed your book. Your parents gave it to me to read. And so I guess that they're proud of me and they read it and they liked it enough to show it to someone else. But that's just a guess.
Well, it's probably a guess.
Yeah.
It seems like they had some pride.
Some sort of pride, yeah. But they never told me about that. And then the second book, because it is their stories, before I sent it to my publisher, I showed them the manuscript because I didn't want them. I wasn't asking for permission, but I didn't want them to be surprised, or offended in some way if they saw things in there. They couldn't read it, but they could see the images, and if they saw things in there that they weren't expecting. And so I kind of went through page by page trying to explain what each page was about. And my dad got bored and kind of just wandered off and said something like, I don't need to read this because this is my life. And then my mom looked through the whole thing, and the only thing she said at the end was, this looks like a lot of work.
Well, at least you could appreciate that. Right?
Yeah. And also, I don't know why anyone would ever want to read this, was the other thing she said. But, not insultingly, just matter of fact, like this isn't all that interesting to her. So why would it be interesting to anyone else?
So it's more like she just couldn't appreciate the power of her own story.
I don't, and she couldn't, I speak about that in the book itself, when I ask her in the book, why she hasn't told me more about her escape to Hong Kong. And she said, why would I? It's just so ordinary, and that says it all, like she just thinks of it as something that happened, and a lot of people did it back then, and she knows a lot of people who went through the same thing, and so it's not interesting.
Far from ordinary.
I know.
Where's your brother in all of this?
He was right there growing up. Similarly, he's less sensitive than I am, and so I think his experience of growing up with my parents wasn't as fraught. He's just kind of a happy guy. But, everything that happened to me happens to him. And so, but he can kind of just laugh it off. Like, for example, a couple months ago, he was over at my parents' house and he mentioned that it was his birthday, and they were like, oh really, your birthday's in May? and he told me about it because we just like to joke about things, and he's like, they just forgot my birthday like entirely. And then a few weeks later, my cousin had a baby, and I was over there telling them, like, your nephew had a baby born at the end of May. And my dad said, oh, isn't your birthday in May? And I said, no, that's Michael's. Like, he was just here 2 weeks ago telling you that. And it just didn't stick. Like, and it's just, I don't even know. It's just the way they are, where my brother and I are in our late 40s now. It's not going to change. So we're just laughing about it more than anything now.
It seems common for a lot of us to have to come to terms with our parents' frailties, what they haven't been able to do. And then we all have to kind of come to terms with that and find our way through it. And, now while we talk about it, you can chuckle about it, and you have a better perspective of it, and you've kind of gone through that. Were there other emotions that you had to work through to get to the point of being able to just laugh about it?
Yeah, what I do want to say is I laugh about it, but it also upsets me. Like, I still can, like, when they said they didn't want to come to my book launches, like, I cried. Like, and I think that's okay too. That doesn't mean that I'm not, working through things in a healthy way. Like, you can feel your emotions, and like, but also I can let them go, like, this isn't going to ruin my day or ruin my life that they, are so closed to stuff like that.
And that's what makes it healthy, though, is that you allowed yourself to cry when you felt those genuine feelings.
Yeah. And so, I still feel hurt by things, but I think it's just that in the broader thing kind of around that, I can work through it and tell myself that, like, this isn't, I can, I can work through those hurt feelings to a point where I don't feel as hurt, right? Like, and that I'm not going to let it ruin my life or change how I feel about myself, which I think is the most important thing. Is like, I think growing up I had a lot of self-esteem issues and self-confidence issues, and not that I'm past all that, but I think I have a much healthier view of myself and my self-worth now, and that, when my parents just don't care about something, it's not as damaging. I can kind of move past it much quicker and kind of work on my own kind of self-healing, take care of myself.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time and having this conversation. It's been really great to hear about your experiences and your life.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Teresa, where can people find you?
I have a website. It's byteresawong.com. So that's byteresawong.com. And I'm also somewhat active on Instagram. And that handle is at by_TERESAWONG, so at by_Teresa Wong. And my books are for sale, anywhere you buy books, like Amazon, good bookshop.org, all major bookstores. I think that's it.
In This Family is presented by Nexus Family Healing, a national nonprofit mental health organization. You can learn more about Nexus and how to support our mission at nexusfamilyhealing.org. The show is produced by John Moe with music from Jeremy Messersmith. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate, and write a review. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray. See you next time.